Rick!
Uncharted 2 Among Thieves is an outstanding sequel to one of the most revered games of the PlayStation 3 generation. I hope my opinion personally on the game carries slightly more weight than some because I do not like Uncharted 1. Playing it makes me sad, whereas playing Uncharted 2 makes me feel like I'm on an adventure and I gotta stop Lazarevich and I have friends and I would have chosen Chloe.
God, you're an ass.
Last night, as of my writing this, I was discussing why I love Uncharted 2 so much with one of my closest human buddies, Mark Ward. After I finished a short, weirdly passionate rant, he wisely summarized both of our feelings at once by saying, "Yeah, Uncharted 1 feels like a pilot." That is profoundly accurate. Uncharted as a series is absolutely a television show whose first episode, in my opinion, is very hard to rewatch now. Episode 2, in stark contrast, is the one where they fixed Steve Carell's hair and gave him suits and stuff. It's not an entirely different game from the first one, at least not on paper, but in practice it feels infinitely less punishing than its predecessor. I'm not trying to intentionally be a jerk about Uncharted 1. If you love it, I'm very happy for you. It's just the comparison that's easiest to make. I'm probably going to keep doing it. The most noticeable difference is in the writing and the way characters are portrayed so seriously. The dialogue is sillier, more irreverent and self-aware, thus way more endearing and believable. It sounds counterintuitive when you phrase it like that, but it's less boring. And being less boring is both immersive and likable. Returning characters like Nate and Elena are more refined and developed. New faces like Flynn and Chloe are interesting, memorable, and more complex than at first they appear. Not to mention all the mocap and voice actors knocked it out of the park. I know a lot of that is the writing, they had so much to work with, but the delivery, the inflection, the chemistry, it all makes every cinematic in each section of gameplay feel lively and compelling. Highlighting is also slightly improved to make it a little less ambiguous where the one and only path forward lies, but the biggest leap in that department is the companion AI, something else fueled entirely by those iconic characters who are often present and willing to point out the less than obvious way to go. Most of the time. Even more helpful than the distractions they provide in combat or their sweet navigation device are those occasional little jokes between the big moments. Like this one interaction when I jumped into a pool and Nate says,
Hey, check it out. Marco.
Really?
Come on.
No.
Marco.
"Well done, Naughty Dog." I've heard the Uncharted series referred to as movie games in the past, and sometimes I sort of agree. It's got incredible set pieces, cutscenes blend well into gameplay sequences, and I guess there is a Scooby-Doo villain reveal at one point. If Uncharted 2 is a movie, this movie rules. Although if we're being literal about that for a minute, watching someone else play this in its entirety like a movie without their commentary would be one shitty movie. Not as bad as that new trailer makes the Tom Holland Mark Wahlberg flick look, but not good either. Back to the game though, Bluepoint strikes again and graphics are unbelievable. It's not an exaggeration to say it looks better than the vast majority of other PS4 games, and it's just a remaster. I personally never played the PS3 version back in the day, so I can't speak to any other improvements. I just know it couldn't have looked like this. It helps during a lot of these long, sometimes tedious climbing sections that the environments are so beautiful to look at, so varied from one another, and so different atmospherically from the first game. That variety extends to everything else in Uncharted 2. Yeah, it's still linear, but like with The Last of Us, it just comes off as being very well curated. There are moments of the guiding hands smothering us to death, but now we're being smothered to death in a way that's really well paced. Like, really well paced. Combat can still be annoying, I can still get overwhelmed by waves of enemies and I get kinda pissed, but it very rarely felt impossible. And even when it was tough, it was spaced out between a set piece moment or a cutscene or the climbing or a sweet puzzle. The pacing is something you don't hear complimented or criticized enough. Seems like we all universally loved walking around an idyllic Nepal town though. Glad we're on the same page there. A lot of our gameplay, while much better paced and broken up into more appetizing portions, is still combat. Do I love it? Absolutely not, but it's far less punishing than normal mode was in the first game. The cover system is much more well implemented, and stealth being an option adds much needed diversity while also giving the player the handicap they often need. It's still an Uncharted game, so the bad guy has hundreds of disposable minions, and dispose of them we must. Or, I'll just die over and over, that's cool too. As much praise as I have to lobby towards this much improved sequel, there are still a few very unfair feeling moments. Most offensive is the train situation. It's not all bad, and that sequence actually exemplifies one of the coolest things about this game. It has a very realistic sense of movement, like when the building you're in starts sliding downhill or the train car you're in starts slipping from the beginning. It was here too, I just hated this entire thing. From about this moment onward until we come full circle after the crash, I was in great pain. Oh yeah, and that one tiny room with the burst-firing bullet sponge dudes was horrible. I hated that a fair bit. And while we're at it, this entire hallway, I know, very pretty to look at, but was in fact designed by people who wanted you to claw your own eyes out with your fingernails. It's not as offensive as the train and the boss you face upon its completion, but yeah. Those are the only 3 parts I never want to play again. The whole rest of the game's great. The overall story is interesting, the gameplay and level design are immensely improved, and the cast is truly phenomenal. Everyone gets their time to shine and has a meaningful part to play in the greater narrative. The 2 I keep thinking about the most are Chloe and Flynn. You already know why Chloe's such a wonderful addition, but Flynn deserves some real credit too. Spoilers for a game from 2009 incoming. I'll give you a second. I thought at the end there he was headed for some sort of a cheesy redemption arc. We would feel bad for going behind his back in the beginning, and everyone would have a nice little cry. Instead, he goes out like the biggest dirtball with the most conviction ever, blowing himself to pieces and attempting to take your canon waifu with him. What a scumbag. I love it. And she's fine, so it's okay. She gets the witty banter ending that may or may not have been better with Chloe. That's just a joke. I love the ending very much. It's beautiful and conveys the heart of those characters and the whole game very well. Sometimes I have to sacrifice perfect accuracy for the yucks, and I apologize. In the future, I hope we get more games inspired by Uncharted. Whether that means a new Naughty Dog series like The Last of Us or something that has nothing to do with that, like Jedi Fallen Order. It's hard to imagine, but people have told me in the comments 4 is actually the best in the series, so I'm excited to eventually play the rest of these and work my way there. All in all, I enjoyed Uncharted 2 very much and would highly recommend it. This was everything good from the first game, but further expanded upon with far less of the bad. That train sequence was garbage and it was dumb they made me climb this whole thing twice, but I don't care. This was a great game and was far easier to appreciate for me than its predecessor. Finally, on a slightly unrelated note, you ever stop and think about how much traumatizing shit Nathan Drake sees and then just walks away from cracking jokes? That's probably really bad, right? Like, he sees people die close up, he kills people he doesn't know, whose circumstances he doesn't understand, and seems remarkably unbothered by it. He told Elena her apparent death was only a 4. Nathan Drake is a lunatic. But anyway, that's just something to think about. Thanks for watching.
Fish out of water.
You are so unprofessional.